terrible cognitive disease all my life called lack of direction. And I've been meaning to do this as an introduction to Wollstonecraft, but the more I thought about this, and I finished reading de Beauvoir over the weekend and preparing Friedan, and I read the little chapter from Firestone. And the more I thought about that, this same thing is so important and is present in all of their thought that it needs to be brought as an element of all modern feminism. But since I've already talked about Wollstonecraft fairly thoroughly, it's a post-troduction. And it will be an introduction, but it's the same point. It's enlightenment. And this factor, this element of the conceptual universe that forms, and as you'll see, not just modern feminism, I think this undergirds all modern philosophy and culture. Now we'll talk about what enlightenment is, and there are two distinct senses, and one distinct sense applies to Wollstonecraft, but the larger sense, as you'll see, applies to all of these great feminist thinkers, and indeed, almost all modern philosophers, and even most Americans. Here, let me prove that, by the way. How many of you have ever used or encountered the expression undeveloped nations?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Like third world countries kind of thing?
Yeah, okay, that's another way of saying third world countries. But by the way, most students have no idea what third world means, where that expression comes from. It's a kind of a post-UN historical description. First world is Europe and America. Second world is the Marxist countries, and then third world were the countries untouched by modern philosophies, or at least coming late to the table. So third world is in a way,
I said usually taken over by the first.
Well, by the way, let's go back to what I just said. The developing nations. That's such a common German-American discourse. It's part of American policy. The AID is the Aid and Development Agency for International Development. Okay, so what does that mean? Third world countries is correct. But I mean, what does it mean to say the undeveloped nations? What does that clearly mean we are?
A developed
You
nation.
see what I mean? There's an implicit polarity there. And you might say, well, that's smug, that's self-satisfied. But as you'll see, this idea that we are progress is part of American culture, but it is not because we're shits, it's because,
Well, we are
I'm sorry,
rarely.
it isn't because we're presumptuous and imperialistic marauders, otherwise known as shits. It's because this is an element of modern thought, culture, and life. And it occurred to me, the more we think about this in terms of feminism, this is probably an essential plank to all modern feminism. What's distinguishes by it, did you come away from reading The Republic and Plato thinking that he probably was serious about really changing the way men and women relate in the world?
Yeah.
But you'll see what makes Plato different from, say, a Friedan, or from a de Beauvoir, or from a Wollstonecraft. This might be the essential difference. And so let's see if I can make this critical element clear to you. Then we'll finish up with some discussion of Herland, and then we'll at least introduce de Beauvoir. For Thursday, we'll turn to Friedan and